In today's show, it's a mailbag episode answering listener questions about the pending sale and its impact on the Trailblazers offseason, the team's recent draft history, and what kind of coach is Chauncey Billups. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. Listen to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making this show your first listen. Today's program, we're getting into it with a listener mailbag. We're answering listener-submitted questions all episode long. If you want to get a mailbag question answered on the program, here's how you do it. You email me, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. One more time for you, lockedonblazerspod, P-O-D, @gmail.com. Hit me up there if you got a question. I might not answer it immediately, but I'm pretty good at filing these things away for a rainy day, or in this case, a sunny day in June. We are going to talk about the pending sale of the Trailblazers and how it might impact the team's offseason. We'll talk a little bit about what the Blazers' recent draft history says about them as an overall drafting enterprise and the way they've handled that. And then we will close the show talking about Chauncey Billups. What kind of coach is he? Has he been miscast as a certain type of coach when in fact he's proven to be the exact other version that we perhaps didn't think he might be? Let's get into it. This first question comes from Chris, who sent me an email at lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. And guess what? This question also comes from Scott, who sent me a very similar question at lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. Send me some emails. You might get in the show. It's also just the only way that's where you're going to find me. Let's start with Chris's question. I'm wondering if the Blazers being up for sale would or could play a role in how active the team is this offseason, or how much risk/salary the team is willing to take on. Or is the sale process a non-issue this summer? Scott asks. First, Scott posits, if I were a prospective buyer engaging with the franchise, I would strongly suggest that they not trade or alter any major future assets. Do you think this will impact how the team operates this summer? That's what everybody's thinking. I know that Sean Highkin of Rose Garden Report answered a similar question in one of his recent newsletters, maybe now 2 weeks old, somewhere in that range. And Highkin had written that he had heard from a team source that the business as usual was their sort of marching orders. And I will say that around that same time, perhaps even as that story was published, maybe even the same day, but right around the story was published, without knowing who within the organization told Sean that, I heard from someone within the Blazers organization, basically verbatim, that exact phrase, business as usual. Hey, how is this going to impact? What's this going to change for you guys? Business as usual. That's the operating. That's the MO for this summer. Is that nothing changes? I don't know if I believe that. Even with someone who I trust, within the team, I don't know if I believe it, because it has to impact it a little bit. Because if you're going to make massive altering moves, and also the team is going to be sold in the next, say, 9 to 12 months, which is what I reported here was the anticipated term of the sale process. So deep into next season, if not into next off season, a prospective buyer that would change their opinion a little bit of what it looks like. If you're to take on a ton of money and make this team incredibly expensive, a prospective buyer is going to want to know what that looks like. If you're going to tear it down, right, and get significantly worse and lose a bunch of games and have, there is a direction that will change, maybe not the overall dollar amount of the sale, but it's certainly the short-term appeal, short-term interest, short-term sellability of the team's going to sell. There's 30 of these freaking things, and they pretty much always appreciate in value. They're extremely good to own, and if you're a smart business owner, you're like a super billionaire, you can basically just like operate at a loss forever as an NBA with an NBA franchise, and it'll work out for you. Operating at a loss can be incredibly beneficial to the uber wealthy, as long as you have some other businesses to kind of chunk it up against without getting too deep into the financial weeds. Steve Ballmer having the Clippers lose money has been a pretty good plan. So I don't think it'll have a massive impact, but I don't think it'll have a massive impact because I don't expect the Blazers to make major ripples. Like I expect them to be somewhat active. I don't think they're going to trade all of the players that many of you want them to trade. I don't think all three of Anthony Simons, Jeremy Grant, and DeAndre Ayton are going to find new homes. If I had to guess, one of DeAndre Ayton or Anthony Simons will get traded. Because I think Jeremy Grant's going to be pretty hard to move. But I don't think they're going to like take on big money. I think that seems relatively unlikely. Could they take on, Ayton and Anthony Simons are both expiring contracts. Could they take on somebody with an extra year of salary? Absolutely. Absolutely. Even 2 extra years of salary. But it is the ballooning, multiple massive contracts pressing up against the tax. They're not going to be a tax team, obviously, but like there is, or unloading some like major assets that you value. Would a new owner say, you just dumped Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson? They're not going to do all of those things. So I think what the truth is, like business as usual, is that the Blazers' like plan and vision for what happens over the next 12 months is not so radical such that it would be changed by a potential buyer, but absolutely in general, like these big seismic changes, which I don't even think the Blazers are really like a team that is set up for seismic change based on how the roster is constructed. The big seismic changes would impact some like buyer interest one way or another, and I think they're relatively unlikely to happen. We have seen in the past during the sale process of the Minnesota Timberwolves when it was like the sale was agreed to, but it was like A-Rod was paying it for the Timberwolves on layaway. Like right when the process was agreed to, the new ownership group. With A-Rod and Laurie, they really pushing. They really pushed for the Rudy Gobert trade. They pushed for an all-in trade, the type of stuff new owners really push for. They push for an expensive asset-heavy trade. If a new owner were close, in tow, under contract, but not officially there, then you could see it happen. But I don't think, then you could see maybe some more seismic things happen. But I don't think there's a world in which the Blazers like trade a pick to the Bulls this summer to unlock their future picks and then, package 5 picks together to try to trade for a star. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So while I don't think that I reject the premise that it'll have no impact, I think it'll have no impact because the plan with the folks running the team is not as grandiose such that it would get to the level of like, hey, this changes the sort of appeal of this asset as a saleable thing. Let's answer some more questions. We'll do that in the second segment, specifically about whether the Blazers are a good draft team under Joe Cronin. Do the Blazers draft well? Have they drafted well with Cronin in charge? One of your fellow listeners posited that exact question. Join me in the second segment, and we will get into all of that. First, I want to tell you that this show is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, therapy can be incredibly valuable because life puts a lot of pressure on you in so many different ways to perform, to provide for your loved ones, your family, and the people that are close to you, and to not show weaknesses along the way. You're supposed to be strong and tough and do things the right way and get through your challenges. But as you are navigating those challenges, the real strength, the real toughness comes from opening up and taking care of your mental well-being. And that's why therapy can be an incredibly valuable tool. Talking to a neutral third party, whether you are going through an acute trauma, a major crisis event, or just navigating the everyday life, learning how to set boundaries, build healthy coping tools, and become the best version of yourself, therapy can be a tool that can help you make progress along the way. And with over 35,000 licensed therapists, BetterHelp makes it easy to find a therapist who understands you. You can connect from anywhere, switch therapists at any time, and fit sessions into your schedule with just a click. It's the largest online therapy provider in the world, and BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Talk it out with BetterHelp. My listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. All right, still rocking along with the listener mailbag. If you want to get involved in a future mailbag episode, you know where to find me. And if you don't, the place to find me is lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. Again, some of these emails are pretty old, but I keep them stashed away. This next one comes from listener Eric, and listener Eric asks, how well do you rate the Trailblazers in the Joe Cronin era as talent evaluators and their draft expertise and their talent evaluation? Yeah, I think the simple, boring answer to this is that it's too early to tell. That's the simple, boring answer. It is. It's deeply unfun, but I think it is true. Typically, I would say judging a rookie class probably takes 3 to 5 seasons. Shaedon Sharpe just completed his 3rd season. He was the first lottery pick of the Joe Cronin era. He missed basically an entire year due to injury. I don't think that's Joe Cronin's fault, personally. I don't think that's Mike Schmitz's fault or anyone in the front office fault that Shaedon Sharpe got hurt. It is what it is. But he's basically played 2 years in the league. We haven't seen a ton of him. Scoot Henderson has played 2 years. Donovan McClingan 1. It's too early to tell. That's the boring answer. But I can say this for sure. Pretty hard to say that they're really, really good at it. It's pretty hard to say that they're well above average in the draft. Certainly there's hope that they get there, and certainly the jury can still be out, and certainly nothing is set in stone. But like, Shaedon Sharpe has not popped to be like a surefire all-star. And while he has, scored pretty well with some efficiency issues, but scored pretty well at a very young age, that's kind of the thing that he does right now. And he's not a great shooter, but he doesn't bring a lot else to the table. That doesn't mean that he might not pop in year 4 and be awesome, but it means like what we've seen, what we can judge. I think there's like immediately after him, Dyson Daniels gets drafted. And I think Dyson Daniels has been significantly more productive last season, significantly more like positively impactful than Sharpe. But would I be surprised if Shaedon Sharpe ends up being like better than Dyson Daniels over the next 3 years? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because of the talent. But I'd like, connecting potential to production is the challenge, right? And right now we're still talking about Shaedon Sharpe as a potentially very good player, as opposed to like a player with obvious production to point to. Obviously, with the caveat that he just scored like 18 points per game at 21, for sure. But he's not like this incredible home run at 7, right? Amen Thompson really clouds the Scoot Henderson pick. Let's just keep it a buck. Amen Thompson just made first team All-NBA. He looks like one of the best defenders in the league. He is not yet 22, I believe. Or if he is, he's not yet 23. Like he's so young, and he's already an elite defensive player. He's already a very impactful player with like kind of no jumper. This dude can't shoot, and he's a serious like menace, like serious problem. That clouds the Scoot pick a lot, because when you pick at 3, picking at 7, I don't like. You hope you get a good player, but there are once you get outside the top 5, like the long history of the league basically is like from the top of the draft from the top of the first round to the bottom is basically like a linear graph of like likely win shares production. Like it's just like top picks produce better. So like dropping all the way down from 1 to 7. Yeah, there's like some outcome assumptions, and I don't think like Shaedon Sharpe is way under like a typical outcome assumption for 7. Scoot is below some of your outcome assumptions for 3, particularly the way the Blazers talked about him, and Amen Thompson's production right behind him really clouds that pick. If Scoot takes off and Shaedon Sharpe takes off, this is why I said it's too early. The boring answer is it's too early. If those dudes take off and they're really good, then we ignore this stuff. Who cares? Who cares what they looked like after these 2 years? But I'm talking about how do you rate them now, right? And Klingon, I think Klingon was a really good pick in a bad draft. I do. I think he's going to end up being really productive. I think he's going to end up being really productive relative to his draft class. I think he's going to end up being pretty good. Is he a franchise-altering talent? No. But I think you could make a case that he was the best center in the draft class, and there's some good centers in his draft class. Kel'el Ware looks pretty good. Zach Edey looks pretty good. Yves Missi, I'm not a Missi guy, but I'm kind of a doubter, but like Missi looked pretty good as a rookie, no doubt about it. Yeah, like Klingon being a good pick in a bad draft is a money pick, right? So are the Blazers what? Like if you're just looking at if you're just kind of looking at their high lottery picks. Chris Murray at 23. Chris Murray doesn't look like a high level NBA player. Doesn't even look like a for sure like positive NBA player thus far. Even though he's pretty darn good defender, but the offense is farther enough away to like put in question his future in the league straight up. It is 23 is hard to get right. It's hard to find NBA players at that range, right? And the fact that the Blazers maybe didn't find an NBA player at 23 in the first round pick in the draft, it's fine. That's a normal, typical outcome for that pick. That is not. I wouldn't even insult them. It's like, should they have drafted Ben Shepherd over him? Yeah, like there's a player that was in his draft range that's better than he is, but like I don't. That to me is not actually worth. That's like barely criticism. Ryan Rupert was a teenager taken in the second round. He has not done much in his first 2 years. Do you criticize them for not nailing a second round pick? No, absolutely not. Jabari Walker kind of looks like a fringy guy, like who's going to be like struggle to stay in the league. He's a freaking pick in the 50s, right? Like it's just those are reasonable outcomes. So all of this is to say the Blazers are probably have been in the Cronin era. Like they've the like identifying talent in the trade to get Toumani Camara and the trade to get Deni Avdija. Those are good. Those are good things. If Shaedon Sharpe, like we're talking, my opinion on this could change pretty quickly because my opinion isn't particularly firm. It's just it is what it is. Is like thus far to date, I don't think you can say the Blazers are under Joe Cronin are like an above average drafting team. I think you can make a case that they are an average. They've drafted at about like what you'd expect from the spots that they've picked in, with the Scoot pick being a kind of a pretty sketchy one thus far relative to the player picked immediately after him more than anything else. With the caveat that these dudes are super young and really early in the process. That's why I said it could change. It could change pretty quickly. Give me 25 games where Shaedon Sharpe looks awesome to be in next season, and I will change my tune. I won't apologize for this opinion I held in June of 2025, but it is what it is. Like I think thus far, to answer Eric's question, I would say that the Blazers are probably about average at drafting and get about the average outcome when they selecting players at where their draft slot has been. You got to beat the odds to be really good at this. You got to get a draft pick like capital R super duper right. And perhaps as I think it's better to draft, like I said, it's better to judge rookies somewhere between 3 and 5 years down the line, like as they sign their second contracts. Okay, year 5, everyone's beginning the end of their first round. They've finished up the rookie contracts. Who's good? I think that's a great time to be like to take stock. That would be next summer for Shaedon Sharpe. It is. We shall see. But like I would say. Thus far, they have been average with the potential, obviously, for things to change in a hurry because the youngsters that they have, Scoot's first year was so disastrous that like the graph's going to go up. It's just how far does it go up? Because he was a lot better in year 2 than he was in year 1. But how many steps forward is he capable of taking? And if he takes a bunch of steps and he's really good, then all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, you don't feel so bad about it. But right now, June of 2025, I would say they have been an average draft team for their draft slots. And hard pressed to say that they've been even above average at it thus far, but I think there's hope that they hit that above average mark here in the near future. Okay, let's talk about Chauncey Billups. A listener has a question about whether we misdiagnosed what Chauncey Billups' actual strengths are as a coach. I think it's an interesting one to get into, and we will do that in the third segment. Join me there. First, though, I want to tell you that this show is sponsored by and brought to you by the good folks over there at Open Phone, who know that if you're running a small business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had an urgent need, maybe for a plumber or a service provider. If the first person you called didn't answer, did you wait? Did you wait around? No, probably not. You moved on. And that's why your business might need Open Phone, because Open Phone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app that's on your phone as well as on your computer. Open Phone lets you manage business calls and texts from a single app. And then there's a shared inbox feature, which allows your team, however big or small, to jump into any conversation instantly without missing a beat. Plus, they've got an AI agent that handles after-hour calls, answers common questions, and captures leads so you never miss a customer. Open Phone is offering my listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's OPENPHONE, openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you have existing numbers with another service, Open Phone will port them over at no extra charge. It's Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Final question of the show comes from Dr. J. Dr. J asks, this is a long question. Usually I edit these. I edit them down. I read like a 4-paragraph email. In fact, that in question 2 from Eric sent me like 5-paragraph email. I went back and forth a little bit, and I said, that's a good question. I'll use it in the show. I took like a sentence of it that I even edited poorly in my little document, so I read it wrong to you in the second segment. But I'm just going to basically read you the entirety of this email from Dr. J, who asks, everyone stated Chauncey Billups was the coach to bring a veteran team to the next level when he was brought in. But I would say everything to date has suggested that Billups is the exact opposite, that his strengths are molding players who are not fully developed, and that his weakness has been either getting more established players to change their game or to identify how to maximize their existing skills. I look at the successes of the Billups era at the player level and think of early Anthony Simons, Shaedon Sharpe, Scoot Henderson, Toumani Camara, Deni Avdija, Jabari Walker, considering where he was drafted at, even getting a little bit more out of Delano Banton. When I look at players who regressed under Billups, I think of DeAndre Ayton, Norman Powell, Robert Covington, late career Anthony Simons, CJ McCollum, even Damian Lillard at the beginning until Billups finally relented, and Jeremy Grant. Is there something to this? Did we get Billups' skills wrong? I love this question. Dr. J nailed this one. This could be a whole dang show, but I'm going to try to wrap my thoughts around this in about 5, 6, 7 minutes. I think there's something to this. I do, because Billups was indeed hired to bring in gravitas, to push a veteran talented team over the top, to kind of add to be Chauncey Billups, right? To be like, I'm the freaking 2004 Finals MVP. I'm going to be in the Hall of Fame. Now is like, I know how to do this. I have done this recently. I believe Chauncey's final year playing was 2013. Like, I'm not that far removed from playing. When I was doing it, I was one of the best, and I'm going to command your respects because of the pedigree, because of the resume, and because Chauncey's not a BSer, right? He's a straight shooter. From what I understand from folks who have operated around him, is that Billups is not really a screamer, right? He's not yelling in practice, but when he needs to say what he needs to say, he says it plainly, and he's earned the respect of many of his players. I think the best thing you can say about Billups to date is the dudes who play for him pretty genuinely like him, except the ones that didn't, right? It seems like Robert Covington didn't like Chauncey Billups at all. I don't think Norman Powell enjoyed his time in Portland at all. There's been some reports that CJ McCollum was pretty over the Chauncey Billups experience by the time he was let go. Some, obviously he's butted heads with some folks, but I do think this idea that more established players, he's had a little trouble with them. I think for me, it's not maybe molding them to change. It's more like identifying how to maximize them. I think he struggled even early this season with figuring out how he was going to fit Deni into the plan. Blazers didn't have a good plan for Denny. I think they kind of figured it out. It took them, 15, 20 games, and they're like, okay, this will work. And then once they figured it out, Denny got comfortable and he really took off. And then they like gave him, they kind of expanded his role as he kind of figured it out. I maybe quibble with some of Dr. J's list. Like, I don't know how much credit I give Chauncey Billups for like the growth of Shaedon Sharpe. I think he handled Shaedon Sharpe really well this year. I think he said like, dude, you're not playing defense. Go sit down. Like I respect that decision, right? Because the easy thing to do is just to say like, this dude, he just sucks, but the franchise is invested in him, whatever. Like I respect Billups for that decision. Scoot, again, it's like he was so bad the first year. He got a little bit better. Is that Scoot thing? I was like, I don't know exactly. I would quibble with this because I'm not exactly sure where to point to. Has Billups handled Scoot poorly? I wouldn't say that, but he hasn't, the franchise as a whole hasn't really like committed to Scoot. And then like Scoot's been bad enough that he has not deserved the commitment. Like there's twofold there. I think figuring out right away, identifying that Toumani Camara deserved to play and then getting him on the court. Billups obviously deserves credit for that. Kind of like identifying this year, although he has like some obvious warts, says like Delano Banton's role is like just get him in the field goal attempts type of roles. Billups deserves credit for that, right? Dr. J included Klingon on the list. Do we have any idea about Billups's like overall impact on Klingon thus far? I like Klingon. I think I think he was a really good pick in a bad draft. I don't know. I don't know what the coach is the credit for, but I think the flip side kind of proves this other rule. The way that Billups has failed to identify or failed to get the most out of some veterans, like asking Yusuf Nurkic to guard at 30 feet in a hyper aggressive defensive scheme, making Robert Covington a point of attack defender for some reason, like insisting on him being like a point of attack guy. Ayton has the beginning of both of Ayton's seasons in Portland have been rough. I know that people only remember that 8-game stretch he had in January this year, but the beginning of this year for DeAndre Ayton was even worse than the previous season, and he was bad for his first season in Portland, like really bad. He's just like he's had some stretches where he's been more functional, but like in general, this is the two worst seasons of DeAndre Ayton's career. Like I like it, like taken all told. Norman Powell's a weird fit, but Billups did not handle that weird fit particularly well, and I think Norm was pretty miserable here. I do think misidentifying particularly veteran players has probably been a weakness of Billups. So is he actually better because he, players who don't have an established role, an established skill set are still kind of like lumps of clay that Billups can get them to buy into what he wants them to do. He's able to sort of like coach them hard and they'll listen, a la Scoot and Shaedon Sharpe. And still have the gravitas of being Hall of Fame point guard 2004 Finals MVP Chauncey freaking Billups. Is he actually better as a developing young players? I wouldn't go that far. I think he's probably somewhere in the middle, right? I think he probably, in the way that all humans do, a certain type of personality meshes well with Billups because he's not a screamer, because he's just like a straight shooter. Maybe not even straight shooter. Maybe that's the wrong word, but because he's just going to like say it flatly and bluntly without yelling at you. A certain type of personality probably doesn't respond well to that. And maybe certain players who are like, hey, this is what I do in the league. Why are you asking me to do something else? Why are you telling me I should be a certain way? Because here's what I am. Year 5, 6, 7, 8. I think maybe that hasn't meshed well. I think the like test of this will be what Billups gets out of this coming season, right? Depending on how much the roster changes, the team might both have continuity and youth, and that would be a really good test of Billups' ability to develop talent. The second half of the season, the Blazers were competent enough on defense for a long enough period of time that it's hard to look at that stretch and not give Chauncey Billups some credit. So I'm not like saying like, oh, he doesn't deserve credit because Scoot and Shaedon it's just like the sort of the natural maturation of young players, and he only deserves credit for the bad stuff, not the good stuff. That's not what I'm trying to paint here. What I'm saying is I have trouble figuring out how much credit to give to him for the development of super youngsters who started scuffling and then got like better. It's easier to point to this veteran did not work out here this was a poor read of how this veteran NBA player who kind of know what they bring to the table, it didn't work here. Moving Damian Lillard off the ball and then like him getting on the ball and putting together one of the great pick and roll stretches that like in terms of points per possession that anyone's had over the last half decade. It's like, yeah, I don't know why we weren't doing this in December. What is going on? That type of thing's easier for me to see from my seat, right? Easier because like I'm familiar with the player and can kind of figure out what is and what's not working. But this season will be a great judge of that, because if you have that combination of youth and continuity, that is the perfect sort of petri dish to judge whether a coach is good at developing talent. Players familiar with the system, back in the system for second, third, and fourth seasons. A coach who has the continuity with that, and also the continuity of system and plan and language and all those things. Continuity of the roster to go along with all of that, and plus the players naturally getting better, because typically players are going to get better as they age. Like on the bell curve, right? Obviously on the backside, it doesn't work great, but that sort of like. The difference in a 22-year-old and a 26-year-old, the difference in a 23, is like the 26-year-old's almost certainly going to be better in the NBA just because that's how it works. And I think this season will be a great judge of this idea, because I think there's something to it. I don't know if I'm really firm in the Billups is actually a really good development coach and a bad coach for veterans. I think he's in the middle. I think he's a good coach for a certain type of veteran, and I'm not 100% clear right now on what we've seen him as a development coach. I don't think he's negative on development necessarily. I certainly would not be on that side. I would say that my feelings are we don't know, and I am neutral on it. Hence all the things I talked about in the second segment. But what an opportunity to prove that side of it, and prove kind of Dr. J's theory, because I do think there's some real truth to this idea, and I think it's a good way to like consider the team going forward, is that maybe Billups does better with guys who are trying to figure out what they are and help define what they are in the league. And I think maybe that's a way to say it. Does that mean he's a good development coach? Yeah, that certainly sounds like it. And I guess we'll get a test of that exact idea as we go into this season. That is going to do it for today's show. You are listening to Vacation Week. Your boy is actually I'm out somewhere having fun. But I will be back, and we'll record another one Friday. This is a 3-episode week due to your host's intrepid host vacation. So there was one on Monday. We'll listen to it with Keith Smith. If you missed it, go back and check that out. This one is Wednesday's program, June 4th, and I'll be back for a Friday show on June 6th. That's what we do most days a week, and when we'll be back next week, 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts, and also on YouTube. Tell your friends about the program. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.